do you want to take a stab at describing those arcs? Because that last sentence did not bode well for me. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 25 years and I have about 27. Tonight we are looking at a video from Monterey. We're looking at Ben Morris and Sarah Van Drake. It felt very classic Ben and Sarah to me, so that's what I liked about it, and that's why I chose it. So,
yep, very excited. I will throw it up in the card above. Nothing like a Ben and Sarah dance to cheer you up.
Yeah,
when your body just doesn't want to exist that day.
Yeah, I am feeling that very hard.
Yeah, so if the vibes just seem a little off, it's because our meat suits just hate us today.
Yeah.
Usually it's just one of us, but tonight it's both of us at the same time. So we're not talking about anything like specific tonight. If we do see anything that is relevant to all of the quality of movement stuff we talked about on our recent episodes, we'll highlight that. But otherwise, we're just framing through this wonderful dance and pointing out the cool stuff that we see, which is the best part of our jobs.
Yep.
To the screen share.
One thing I really like about this dance, I love how Ben structures it, and they are doing a lot of like using the floor. They're not just staying in one place, and I really like that. And Ben kind of sets that tone at the very start, right? Where they're in closed position, normal starting, but then we're immediately moving towards the audience. And I like that. It makes it very, very dynamic, because I don't know that there was a part of the floor that they didn't use. They kind of went in all of the different zones.
And real quick, I wanted to point out this kind of tethered closed position that they get into. It's a really good example of arcing, actually.
Yeah.
Because when they get to max extension, so Ben's right arm getting as straightened out as it can without him getting overextended, that's when it starts arcing. And from a bird's eye view, they're going like clockwise around their shared center. So it's not just straight away. It's not just at an angle. It's straight rotating into an angle.
Yeah. I was going to say, so I don't know that we've really talked about how to use the comp floor well.
Not really, no.
So the way I like to think about it is typically there is kind of like that center starting point. And then I kind of think that there is a front and back right behind and in front of that spot. And then also there is like, it's kind of in like boxes. That's the way I like to think about it.
So right now, this first one is just showing like bird's eye view with the competitors, judges. And so this is where they're starting out. So this is the same bird's eye view, but I'm adding a grid and they're starting here.
And I think that in this particular dance, I think they kind of went in all of those areas. Yeah. Like, I don't think there was an area that they didn't really go in. Maybe one, but I think they moved through it at one point. But I think that a lot of times for spotlight situations, people kind of get caught either in the middle, or if you're looking from the audience, they kind of get caught to either the right or the left.
Yeah.
And I think more frequently, I feel like it's the right that they're kind of getting caught.
Yeah, it kind of depends where the home team audience is. That tends to be the corner that sucks them in. And I like the concept of doing like a triangle. So you start in the center and then you try to fill out the floor and then you cross to the other side and then you can come back. And whether you do that like clockwise or counterclockwise doesn't really matter. It's a great way to like fill out the floor. Another thing that can be really helpful to think about, especially as a leader, is each leader tends to have a dominant side that faces the audience. So
Mhm.
some leaders, they're open to the right to face the audience through most of their patterns, or they're open to their left through most of their patterns. And being cognizant of that will tell you which patterns to do to help you travel and to still keep you projecting towards the audience.
Mhm.
Another thing I wanted to highlight through this front section, because we don't get many videos from the end of the slot that we
Mhm.
analyze here on Nerdy.
Yeah.
And because they do travel towards the judges, we can see some pretty nifty details. So, for
Mhm.
example, Ben's really extending his left arm so that way Sarah's right arm is in a comfortable frame
Yeah.
for this instead of it being pulled behind her head. And then as he scrolls towards the audience, he keeps her right hand on the right side of her body
Yeah.
instead of pulling it. He's like, oh, now I'm moving. It can come with me. No, he's still adjusting to Sarah completely so she can have a very comfortable frame.
Mhm.
And then this turn right here, he's very much traveling from one rail to the other, again, to make space for Sarah.
Yeah.
And right here, this is the first time where she has shifted rails, is through this turn.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's because of the way that he's kind of sending her out, because he's bringing her um to put him or to put her next to him
Mm-hmm.
instead of in front. So that's the reason she's kind of switching rails. It's not because she's just wanting to switch rails.
Right.
And then to me, what it looks like here is just, it looks like they kind of release and are using the thought process of we're just going to keep doing this same motion, Sarah
Mm-hmm.
specifically, until she's led to do something different or she sees that Ben is moving.
Yeah. If she were to suddenly change this simple step, change weight, it would
Mhm.
be out of nowhere because he wouldn't be able to feel it and make it more confusing.
I like that she kind of scrolls away from him there because I feel like generally Ben does such a good job of scrolling from his partners. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that she initiates and kind of increases that distance between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
As she's stepping back to kind of scroll away, right? She's lowering her body a little bit and then she's kind of straightening it up. And so we have like kind of that arc created in her body in order to smooth out this lead.
Her hips are here. They get up here. And then they sink down to go forward. It is
Mhm.
like so subtle.
Yeah.
Let's turn on the ghosting. Yeah. So it's a path that does this. So it's the left half of a figure eight.
Yeah. It's interesting because they do kind of have a moment where they kind of paused just briefly. But there's still slight movement happening between them. It's
Mhm.
mostly just from the hands, um, and the arms that are connected. Like if you're watching at speed, it kind of looks like they're stopped, but there's still like a very slight movement.
Mhm. And this is one of the things we were talking about in our quality of movement series that like you don't want to stop your momentum unless you're doing something very specific.
So this is really fun.
Oh, to be
It's
that close to the
hard.
ground.
It's a little hard to see just because of the camera angle, but basically what's happening, at least what it looks like, is so Sarah has her right arm wrapped around Ben's like across his back, like all the way across his back.
Mhm.
Um, and he is like hooked under her arm, and he has his hand further across her back than you might normally.
Mm-hmm.
And she takes this connection, right? Because it's like a chest to chest and they're very wrapped around each other. So it's a really secure connection up top. So she
Mm-hmm.
takes that and she uses that to kind of push her feet out away from her.
Mm-hmm.
And that is creating kind of an angle. And so this is kind of, she's in one sense kind of hanging off of him because of the arm that's wrapped around his back, but then at the same time, she's kind of pushing with the chest into him
Mm-hmm.
to keep that connection. So he's just going to feel a lot of extra weight. He's not necessarily going to feel her like pulling him down because she's pulling towards herself with her arm, but then also kind of pushing with the chest.
Mm-hmm.
And then she, because of that connection, she's able to just kind of bring her feet right back in and stand up.
And then I just want to highlight how much Ben is squatting down and back
Mhm.
to counterbalance her weight.
Yeah.
Because when she shoots her feet out away from them, that's sending weight away from their shared center, which means he has to move in the equal and opposite direction in order to counterbalance that.
Mhm.
So I I would guess that it doesn't necessarily feel heavier for her to be here than here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like going to be a very small change.
Mhm. And again, he's just kind of feel that more down, not so much. Because if you watch what he's doing, like he's not getting pulled too much one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is slightly, but it's not like he's like super pulled away from both feet. And it's more so when she pulls the feet in than when she shoots them out,
Mm-hmm.
because that's going to be a little bit more pulling on him.
Yeah.
Right. So the initial shooting the feet out isn't going to be really pulling too much because she's kind of pulling and then pushing. But
Mm-hmm.
then when she pulls the feet in, she is no longer pushing the chest forward because she's needing to pull the feet underneath her. So
Mm-hmm.
she's still pulling with the hand around him, but then she's also pulling with the feet. So it's going to bring him a little bit more over that right foot of his. But the initial like shooting out of the feet doesn't create that. He's like pretty balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time that she is pulling the feet back in, he's understanding what's happening. So he's able to kind of know to adjust or be prepared to adjust to whatever weight he's getting.
Yeah. I wish more weight support patterns had this clear evolution of like clear connection, seeing where you can go from that connection
Mhm.
and then returning to stability together instead of like no connection, hoping it works out, and then aborting way too fast.
Yeah.
You don't want to play hot potato with your partner.
Ideally, no.
I want to talk about the anchor while traveling forward together because it's party. Okay.
Mhm.
It starts with two steps, a right left, but then this left foot becomes another anchor.
Mhm.
And the way Sarah sits into it is just so juicy and pretty, and it looks like it feels so good. And it
Yeah.
then makes her easier to lead.
Mhm.
And this is a part where the arcs become a little bit more complex because you're not going back to go forward, you're going forward and you're chilling out in the forward for a hot second in order to go forward again.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a stab at describing those arcs? Because that last sentence did not bode well for me.
So basically, what's happening is kind of a like a circular loop almost. Because she's coming forward with the hips and then she's needing to kind of pause and settle and send the hips back and then continue forward again.
So it looks like it's doing one of those from the audience view.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from the bird's eye view, it's off to her left.
Mm-hmm. So I really like the choice that Ben makes to send her out for the phrase change. And she hits it like perfectly on time too.
Mm-hmm. Before we talk about that a little bit more, I want to talk about Ben's anchor because he's encouraging her. He's leading her to anchor. It's like we're gonna load the spring again because basically what happens is he has this idea. There's this break coming, but he needed an extra 2 counts, so he added a walk anchor at the beginning in order for that 1, 2, 3, and 4 timing was it? So that hit at the right time. And in order to encourage a follow to anchor right here, he's using the center counterpoint of the closed position arm, so his right arm, and he is simultaneously extending his arm while he's moving to his left. What happens when you extend your arm and move and counter to it, the elbow doesn't travel as far, and that's the center counterpoint. And so what that does is it encourages Sarah to not travel as much while Ben can continue to travel and load up the spring in his right arm. So he gets to full extension without overextension. And then he can really lead with a lot of power out of that because there is weight from her putting weight into his hand through her back and him on the other side of it. So it's like a stretched rubber band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this works because Sarah's mentality as the follow is to always be sitting back unless she's being led otherwise.
Yeah.
So that's why when he is giving her that little extra release to sit back, she is, following well and sitting back into it. A lot of follows don't necessarily do that. So they probably would have missed that. But when you have that mentality as the follow of staying behind the lead and like actually having them move you and not just guessing what they're leading you into, that's when you're able to really follow well.
Right. All right. And then we get to this fun break that Alicia mentioned earlier, and it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 is the timing. And it's really important to note, because I'm a stickler about this every time we encounter some sort of hammerlocky shenanigans. Ben is not yanking on her hand to release her from this position. He is actively pushing on her back with his left hand.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that real clear.
Yeah.
Right here.
And it's like directly away. It's not like at any real angle.
Yeah, he's not trying to rotate her. He's just trying to get her to continue moving down the slot. And then he releases the arm down.
Right. And the releasing of the arm down is kind of what rotates her slightly.
Yeah. Because she runs out of rope. And she's choosing to kind of hyperextend to hit this pose.
Yeah.
And Ben is noticing and not applying any more pressure on her compromised shoulder. And then this is one of those cool things like, oh, we're in a unique position. I can do something different than normal. And because Ben is Ben, he does that. It's just so cool. He's taking advantage of the moment instead of waiting for Sarah to like turn back around and face him.
And that gives Sarah the opportunity to spend a little bit more time in that presentation moment she's in while he's moving around her.
And just like in the beginning, he is doing his best to have this hand as far that way as possible.
Mhm.
He's like too far away to get it completely to her right side, but he's trying to keep it over the center of her head at least.
Yeah.
But once it comes time to lead with that arm, he's making sure that arm is on the right side of her body
Mhm.
before he starts leading with it.
I love this. This is such like a classic Sarah thing where she does like a just like a hand kind of down the body roll almost as she's anchoring on beat for styling purposes. I love that. It's really simple, but like really effective.
It's so nice.
And so that like kind of extended position where she's kind of sending the hip back and the other foot. So left hip is sent back, right foot is kind of extending forward. That's when the beat is hitting. So it's kind of like a kickball change 1 to 2 moment.
Mm-hmm. And it's also pressing her up out of that left foot.
Mhm. Also, I like the little shimmy beforehand. I think that's such a really fun, like both things that she does right here, the little shimmy and then the kind of styling of the hand sliding down. Both really fun ways to accent what's happening in the music while you're also continuing to move down the slot.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's not any point where she's just like super stagnant.
Right.
And this is one of the things I was talking about when they're like using the floor really well, right? Because they're going from this front corner here, moving all the way across.
So after her body roll, she takes another right. Um, but this step with her left again is another one of her. She's actually anchoring
Yep.
and waiting to be led. Um, and I want to talk about this twist in the hand right here.
Mm.
Because it's possible for one very particular reason is that it's supinating her hand instead of pronating it.
Yeah.
So it's actually going into more ergonomic instead of
Hmm.
he's the one that's actually in a compromised position because
Yeah.
his arm is twisted that way.
Hmm.
Um, but because he's leading, he then has control over that. He's putting himself in that position. It's not
Right.
somebody else putting him in that position. Um,
Right.
whereas she's being just gently, and what that does when a leader um, supinates your arm is it naturally brings that side of the body forward with the arm.
Hmm.
So that's what he's using to bring her right side forward to prep for a turn.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that this is a little bit more opiniony, but I think that the person that is the one initiating the movement at the moment should be the one that is in the compromised position because they are the one that knows what's happening, whether
Yep.
that be the lead or the follow, because follows can sometimes, choose to do something different. And sometimes that will end up with one of them in a compromised position. And as the follow, if you're going to do that, it should be you because
Mm-hmm.
the lead doesn't know what's going on, right? So the one that is initiating and knows what's going to happen is the one that should be getting in the more compromised position.
Yep. Which at your basic levels, more often than not, is the leader.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you can see, so he uses that to bring her right side forward, and then he untwists it and brings her hand to a more normal position. It's like a handshake for her. But because of that twist in the arm, that's really bringing her left hip forward, which is completing the prep.
And I love that this is still progressing. They
Mhm.
went all the way across the floor.
All right. This anchor right here is another really good example of arcing. So one of the things that I see sometimes, which just makes me sad, is someone will be moving in an arc, like they'll be traveling in an arc, like Sarah is for her triple. She's
Mhm.
doing a nice gentle arc on the floor. And then as soon as it's time to anchor, they're like, no more arc. And they
Yeah.
just like
Wow.
shoot their hips straight back away from their partner.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas Sarah is like banking off the left corner of the slot.
Mhm. So she's kind of putting her weight away from the connection, and she's using that foot movement of drawing it in and around to help complete that, right? So when you're drawing that foot in underneath you, that's bringing more weight into that backwards position. And so that's helping create that weight kind of along the back to create the arc. Was that helpful?
Yes, thank you. Is holy cow. And then Ben is doing the equal and opposite on the other side. So
Mhm.
uh again from a bird's eye, this is the slot. She's banking around this corner. He's banking around this one. The cool thing about doing that as the leader is it naturally brings, and you can watch his right shoulder, it naturally starts bringing his right shoulder back to anchor that way because he's arcing around the corner of the slot. So
Mhm.
he doesn't have to think about on count one because it's naturally happening because he's rounding out that corner. His
Yeah.
right shoulder is naturally going to start coming backwards.
Yeah. That was a great sound effect.
You're welcome. A balanced dance for who's doing the traveling.
Mhm.
Like she'll go, he'll go, she'll go, he'll go, she'll go, he'll go. They'll go together, together, together. She'll go, he'll go.
Yep.
It's really hard to say quickly. And like your basic, it should be the follow doing the majority of the traveling
Mhm.
when you're a baby. But then sometimes when leaders learn to do things, they're like, I can do things. And then the follow never goes anywhere.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We still want the follow going places.
Yeah. And especially if you're in like a spotlighted competition situation, like you're going to need to both be moving or
Yeah.
it will not look interesting.
Yeah.
And I do feel like a lot of times what we see in these kinds of spotlights is the more, okay, I'm moving, now you're moving, now I'm moving, now you're moving. And that's one way to accomplish it. But I think there's just kind of a lack of like we're moving at the same time.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that Ben and Sarah do really well.
Yeah. Here's another example of Sarah rounding out the corner,
Mhm.
transitioning from lateral to linear movement.
Yeah, she does a little extra step there.
Yeah.
So she kind of does like a sideways shuffle and then takes a smaller sideways step, the second step, and then drags the foot in and under and forward. And it's really subtle because the base she's working with at that moment is pretty small.
Hmm.
But you can also kind of see that like her hip goes back slightly in order to really anchor and get the feet out ahead.
Yep. Once again, they're kind of in opposite corners. She's here, he's here, but he did, and she had been moving in this direction. What a less advanced leader might choose to do is then lead the follow to come at you, which would create this really harsh angle, right?
Mhm.
But instead, what Ben does, get rid of that one, is he lets her go more lateral and then brings her forward down a new slot, essentially, for her.
Mhm.
And he gets in front of her to accommodate that new slot. Leading a follows arc. I used to call it nutmeg before I knew more about what it is I was doing.
Mhm.
Because it was just the concept of letting a follow not just move away from me straight down the slot on an anchor, but let them have a little bit of a pocket into their left side, my right. But what that allows is for the follow's feet to collect underneath them and to move forward down a new runway,
Yeah.
essentially. And every follow, depending on how they dance their anchor, what body composition they have, that arc, the distance between the two runways is going to be different. And so allowing a follow's arc through their anchor to be what their body and their style wants to be will
Mhm.
make your job so easy as a leader. All the follows will love you. They will line up for you. It gets tiring. You have to run away. Um, but it makes such a huge difference
Yeah.
socially and competitively.
Yeah.
The way she hangs back into this one is so juicy.
Mhm.
So you can see if we draw a straight line straight up from her heel, she is way behind that forward foot.
Yeah.
And then she basically displaces to stay behind that forward foot. But even then, like her instep is right in front of her nose. She's still
Mhm.
hanging back quite a bit.
Yeah. And she's creating kind of an even more extreme version of this because she is starting it with her knee bent.
Mm-hmm.
You can't create this as well if you're dancing on straight legs.
Mm-hmm.
And she does straighten them as she's coming out of it, but initially she's kind of softening into the knees, bending, and letting that uh, give her the extra distance to reach out in front of her.
Yeah. And then Ben is actually bringing her up over that left foot.
Mhm.
You can see right here, he's bringing his right arm down the slot and off the slot.
Yeah.
And he's also, again, doing that hand rotation we were talking about earlier. So he's bringing her into that more ergonomic position
Yeah.
and then leading her. And look at how much room she has to swing that right foot through.
Hmm.
She has an actual runway and not a balance beam.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like a leader's hand will do the right thing, but then their body is in the way. And you're like, oh, I cannot follow through on that lead.
Hmm.
One of us will die. Man, what? How many counts was that? Like, was that 2, 3, 4, 4 counts? And they went from the front of the floor back to the middle.
Yep.
And then we have another really juicy anchor from both of them.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting. Ben creates it by kind of hooking behind himself
Mhm.
initially.
I just noticed they're like almost matching the Monterey.
This is fun. So this is a interesting example because generally we don't see too much kind of rebounding in like the champions division because they are creating more of the arcs. But sometimes, you want to do something different, or just because of the positioning, it's going to end up being a little bit different. But she kind of shoots her hip out away from him and kind of hits extension. And then because there is some kind of acceleration from it, because she is initiating with that right foot to kind of shoot the hip out, she kind of just rebounds back towards him.
Mhm.
And that's fine sometimes. It's just we don't want that to be like the basic what you're doing the whole time is
Yeah.
just rebounding.
Yeah.
Oh, just because of the positioning that they're in, because they're so close and they're in a double handhold. That's kind of why Sarah's trying to get away from him. And so that's just kind of creating that moment where they kind of have to do a little bit of a rebounding.
Mhm.
And Ben is leaning away from her as well so that they can get some kind of stretch because they're so close.
Yeah. But then he redirects it to an arc on this
Yep.
side,
Mhm.
and he lets her have kind of like a U-turn
Yep.
in his right arm to make that exit nicer. What is this face on him right now? So silly. All right. So this one, it might look like she's just going from circular to straight.
Yeah, she's not though.
Yeah. After she places her left foot right here, her left foot is slightly out ahead of her. So as she finishes shifting her weight onto that foot, that's when she gets to bank around the corner.
Hmm. It's just more subtle.
Yeah.
And also because of what Ben's leading, she's also kind of taking that arcing momentum and it's starting to go a little bit up as she's
Hmm.
coming through.
Yep.
And again, we're back in the center of the floor. We're moving all the way across.
Hmm.
And I like that they're kind of taking a moment or two in each area, really.
Hmm.
And I would say like the part of the floor that you don't need to use as much is kind of those three squares that are kind of towards the back of the
Yeah.
floor, just because you're getting close to the competitors generally, and or you're just moving further away from your audience. You ideally want to use kind of the first two, like that middle one, and then the one that's closest to the audience. And then that back one you can use as well. But if you're going to ignore any of them, it would be the one that's farther
Yeah.
away from the audience.
Yeah. So I want to highlight something about the way Ben uses this leg extension right here,
Mhm.
because he's in part using that to help move his center from in front of his foot to the other side of his foot,
Mhm.
because that's what's actually leading Sarah to move forward.
Yeah.
And sometimes I see leaders learning the cool stuff you can do with your legs as a leader,
Mhm.
but not letting it actually affect your
Yeah.
center, and therefore it doesn't affect the connection.
Right. And the important part of that is that you can see his hip, the left side is kind of dropping away from Sarah.
Hmm.
And that's what's really kind of initiating. And he's not letting his arms get overextended.
Yeah. Like I see so many leaders like this will be great, but then
Mm-hmm.
the upper body will be back here and the arms will be short. And then the
Yeah.
follow's like, am I supposed to go somewhere?
Yeah. I love all the usage of like double handhold in this dance.
Hmm.
It really makes it feel like they're moving and working together more.
And it also can be helpful because we're in the back end of this dance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little less energy out of both of
Mm-hmm.
them because they're having to stay so close to each other. They can't travel as far.
Right. This is a moment where, again, we're looking like we're coming to a complete stop,
Hmm.
but it's not quite that.
So I want to talk about, before we get to the stopping part, how he's accelerating her,
Mm-hmm.
because he's doing it by first leading her forward, kind of like normal, but then he starts leading her down.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before. Direction plus a change in elevation
Yeah.
is an acceleration. just because of how the physics of the length of the follow's arm works. Or he isn't having to lead her faster to get her to come forward faster. His hand is kind of moving at the same rate the whole time. It's a very even spacing in these frames.
Mm-hmm.
But she's accelerating because of the change in height.
Yeah.
That's a really important distinction. And then because he knows how much he's accelerating her, he's offering his left hand on the front of her right shoulder so he can help slow her down because he knows how much acceleration he just gave her.
Mm-hmm.
All follows have been there when the leader does like direction, elevation, and they speed up the hand. And it's like, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
All right, now we can talk about the stop that isn't a stop.
Yeah, so this is like really effective breaking from Ben because Sarah is, in theory, kind of stopping because she's planting the right foot in front of her, and that's not going anywhere. But because she is reaching out to plant that foot, she is like letting the rest of her body catch up to it. And then that at the same time is happening, Ben is kind of resisting her coming forward because she does have all of that momentum that we were just talking about. And so rather than just bringing her into a complete stop, he's actually just slowing her down to a point and then letting her release backwards, right? So there's never a point where we're just like stopped. Like what makes it look like that is because she is planting that right foot and not going anywhere, but the rest of the body is kind of catching up and then releasing out of it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when you're in a car and you're braking at a stop sign, right? Like you feel yourself go forward as you're slowing down and then you stop and you kind of settle back.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Yeah. In 3D character animation, the concept, well, there are three concepts, but the first one is the concept of a moving hold. Because with a 3D character inside a 3D universe, if you don't make them move, they don't move at all. So like a 3D character literally not moving is uncanny valley territory. It's like that's not right. And learning how to give a character the right kind of movement so it looks natural, even though they're like not going anywhere. It's like one of the hardest things to do. And then another concept. So if we have two circles, both going this way, and you want to like stop on the line, there's where you can like slow in and stop right there. And then there's the one you were just describing, which is a bit of an overshoot.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of bounces back and slows down. And depending on what kind of musical effect you're going for, you'll choose one over the other. So, like, for example, popping, a hard pop actually involves the overshoot because you want to go just a little bit too far and then rebound back to a hard stop. And that's what makes it have that pop effect instead of trying to like get right there. You can't. The human body just can't. The human body is going to reverberate a little bit. So taking that and using it to your advantage can be really helpful.
Yeah.
It looks like we're doing math now.
It does. We kind of are to an extent.
Yeah. And then this is a callback to their just basic weight transfers at the beginning of the dance.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the end.
Yep. The ending is really fun.
I love it so much.
I
Okay,
think
that was fun.
Covered some good topics, even though we didn't have a topic to talk about specifically.
No, we never do. We all we need is a video.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. We did a fun thing over on Patreon. I don't know when you'll have it up because I know
Should probably be up this Friday or next Friday.
Okay, cool. We just did a reaction to a Mad Jam All-Star Strictly, I think, where we just watched all of the spotlights, just did our thoughts on like the entire comp, save for one dance, the
Mhm.
It wasn't up. So that's going to be up on Patreon soonish. So if you've ever wanted like us to do reaction videos, it's our
So
first. Let us know what you think. Other than that, we will be back someday. We just keep on and
we've had
going.
a lot going on recently.
Yeah, they poked a whole bunch of holes in me and cut some ligaments and
Did some things.
yeah, yeah. Thought there was just going to be 3 or 4 holes in my stomach, but no, there's 7.
Just a few more.
Yeah, it's just almost like double the amount that I expected.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just glad it was robotic, laparoscopic, because no, I don't want the full open book treatment. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be dancing again for like half a year. And right now it's been 1 month and 10 days, and I'm already going bonkers.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right. Well, we will see you all next time. Thank you for joining us.
yep,
At some point, we'll get back onto a regular schedule.
yep. And I will be live and in person at Easter Swing in case anyone wants to, I don't know. I'm awkward in the wild. Those of you who have met me in the wild, you know the my my autism becomes very prevalent in person. I apologize in advance. Bye. Think of it
But
like the
because
cloves
of,
in your spice cabinet. Just one.
yeah, yeah,
Just one.
yeah.
Unless
It's
you're
just
studying
because
an orange for Christmas. No, no more. Arrest me? I don't. Ugh. Usually I'm proud of my bad jokes. I'm not proud of that one. All right.